Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that, like, you hear the formative years of somebody like Mr. Beast and how long he was chipping away at it with, like, 0 audience, and that man just kept cranking out those videos, and it's one of those things. It's just like, okay, well, imagine if you borrowed that, but you put that towards, you know, creating a killer portfolio of advertising work, or you did that much consistency, but you were making headway on X amount of screenplays or stories that you might have. It really, I think that is something you can share across every discipline is that consistency of showing up and just doing it, just because there's no other way, like not doing it, we know where that goes, right? It's just like, then it's done. The only unknown is, if we just keep pushing through, what's gonna be? What's gonna come of this thing?
Welcome, everybody, back to the Full Battery Media Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Trace, and I've got an awesome guest with me today. Would you like to tell people who you are and a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, my name is Mark Maziarz. I've spent over 2 decades in creative advertising and production, launching campaigns for youth brands in a lot of different categories from soda to QSR to gaming to sports. And more recently, I've been working directly with brands in gaming and entertainment studios. Um, and when I'm not doing that, I also operate a small publishing company called Neon Nightlight, where I release my own books and graphic novels and stuff like that.
That's awesome. All of that is awesome, but especially the last part, man. How
Yeah.
did you get into this whole career? Both of your two different. I want to ask about both. How did you get into creative direction, and how did you get into making your own graphic novels? Because that's rad.
Yeah, well, I grew up in the Midwest, kinda grew up in the heyday of just 80s and 90s awesome monoculture where, every sort of world was something you wanted to dive into, and so, I kinda went to, undergrad not really knowing what I wanted to do. I studied journalism, and, after getting out, started to learn from some friends who had gotten through journalism programs that, hey, they were getting into advertising and for me, I hadn't really, besides like, the Nike commercials and the things you see on the Super Bowl, I wasn't exposed to that much of it except for the stuff I was seeing on TV or whatever. But on the sort of recommendation of a lot of friends being like, "Hey, if you wanna do something outside the Midwest that's creative, maybe go to, a portfolio school." So I found myself at VCU's Brand Center, going through a portfolio school there where I quickly learned kinda trial by fire. It's a small group there, but they put you through the paces and you kind of learn how to do this and how to kind of communicate. And of course, through the course of my career, I've gotten to see, social media become a thing, digital media become sort of the place where everything lives. And so, it's been an interesting journey to go from predominantly writing TV commercials for Coca-Cola and, mobile phone companies to now working with, creators who could be from anywhere and, they're kind of bringing their own talents to the table. And so, it's been interesting in that regard. It's been an interesting cross section of the history of advertising to be a part of.
That's awesome, man. Because I sit there and I think about how people find this path, and it's never two stories are never the same. You know, I and why I bring that up is because um, everyone has these different paths into it that brings a little bit of flavor, and so
Yeah.
uh, you've built campaigns around massive franchises, but like
Okay.
I wanted to ask you this because you're also doing your own thing as well. You've got your own creative, niche that you work on. But what can
Sure.
independent creators learn from big entertainment brands and how they build anticipation and hype? Like, how can smaller creators get some of the same creative juice and stuff going, man?
Yeah, I mean, I think because that's certainly how I kind of like got my own stuff going was being able to work. as you said, through collaborations between, brands and entertainment franchises, working directly with the filmmakers of a big, Warner Brothers release, just to like create some type of synergy with a burger moment. But,
Mhm.
through that, really getting to see how their process works and how they, you know, are developing the script and taking that all the way to that final sort of big cultural moment. We're all kind of doing the same thing, right? And so
Yeah.
the one thing that's interesting, no matter the scale of your project, everybody's kind of building in flight. Everybody's kind of building as they go. So I think it's always one of those, you know, things that you might think, oh, well, because they have this big budget and they have all these people working on it, they know exactly where they're going, know exactly what they're doing. But a lot of it is like trial and error. Just get down, let's roll up our sleeves and start, making the thing that we're kind of hoping to make. I think that's kind of the thing that I've gleaned from anything is just like you got to just start from somewhere. You got to just start, get it down, get an audience, even if it's a small one, and just keep growing and keep working at it and keep building it.
Yeah. I think that people don't people underestimate the amount of consistency. I'm trying to say it in a positive way because we always have these terms like war of attrition, that the slogging through it, it's just consistency. I think that the people like
Yeah.
to like I don't know, over make it over dramatic when they're talking about the amount of work that's needed. But it's a lot of work and it's a lot of consistency. You have to keep showing up time after time after time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that like, you hear the formative years of somebody like Mr. Beast and how long he was chipping away at it with like 0 audience, and that man just kept cranking out those videos. And it's one of those things, it's just like, okay, well, imagine if you borrowed that, but you put that towards, you know, creating a killer portfolio of advertising work, or you did that much consistency, but you were making headway on X amount of screenplays or stories that you might have. It really, I think that is something you can share across every discipline is that consistency of showing up and just doing it, just because there's no other way, like not doing it, we know where that goes, right? It's just
Right?
like, then it's done. The only unknown is, if we just keep pushing through, what's gonna be? What's gonna come of this thing?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Because you don't know, but you do know what's going to happen if you don't show up. You do know what's going
Yeah.
to happen if you're not putting it out there. And I think that's one of the things that you find people have all this fear about not succeeding. But you know what? You're
Yeah.
guaranteed to not succeed if you don't put anything out there. And there are I love this word, the doldrums. You ever hear that word? The doldrums
Yeah,
is
yeah,
like
yeah.
the for people who are listening that don't know, it's like when you're sailing across the Pacific, like back in the day, they would hit and the Pacific Ocean is friggin' huge. Like the Southern Pacific Ocean, like these sailors would be there and
Yeah.
there's this one place in the South Pacific that is like it's more isolated from people than you are on the moon, and it's like it's super isolated. And so one of the wild maybe that's not right, but it's really isolated. But like
Yeah.
you're getting to this point in the ocean when the wind stops and you're just sitting there and you can't move. Back in the day of the sailing by
Yeah.
sails, you'd be stuck. And you just at that point you're like, what do you do? And that's the point that many people quit. That's the that many
Yeah.
people, say, I'm done. Nothing's happening. But that's the point that you have to keep going because
Yeah.
something good's gonna come if you do.
Yeah, and I almost kinda wonder in this sort of age where, like, you can get the instant gratification of even if it's, like, 9 people liking what you're doing, you can
Yeah.
get at least 9 of those hearts. I wonder if, like, if that reward system helps keep people going, or if it's one of those things where it's like, if I don't get past this X amount that I have designated as my idea of what success is, then I'm gonna just stop doing this altogether. Like, I don't know if it's like if that entry level reward system helps keep more creators going, or if it, has more of a recoil that is a hindrance in some ways. Because back in the day before social, like, yeah, you just keep writing your screenplay or your script or whatever, and you wouldn't know. You wouldn't know if you're making headway on your craft or not, really. You had a very tight audience of, like, maybe your friends, but now it's like, you got something. You got a few people who are looking at you, and it's like, I feel like that's not nothing.
right? I think that's also a really important point to like focus on is that we have this idea that unless you're doing Mr. Beast numbers, you're not making
Right.
an impact. Like,
Yeah.
like unless I'm that, I'm not crushing it. And people will seek out those numbers by compromising themselves. It's
Yeah.
like, what can I do? Let's get someone to kick you in the nuts. Like I do a YouTube channel with my daughter. I could have her kick me in the
Oh, that's
nuts at the
awesome.
beginning of every episode, and I'm sure our
Yeah.
views would go up. But is that what I really want to be doing when we're focused on STEM and learning and science? I mean,
Right.
it maybe an episode where we're talking about velocity, that would actually work, but I still probably don't want to
Sure.
go there, you know? Um,
No, I'm with you. Yeah, totally.
and so I think that people have to figure out what's your niche. And then, if we get the other day, our videos took a hit. And I don't know what's up with YouTube's algorithm. We were doing great numbers about a year and a half, 2 years ago, 10,000 views
Yeah.
per reel. And then suddenly we're down to like 100. And I was just like, what's going on here? We changed our format a tiny bit, but it's still phenomenal. We're talking to like NASA scientists about like stuff. We're interviewing all these YouTubers that are like doing animal videos and they're
That's
showing us
awesome.
all these animals, which is awesome. Like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and yet the numbers were down and I just had to sit there and go, keep it up. Keep going. Keep creating
Yeah.
because and like we had 200 people watch this last video and I was like, there were 200 kids that watched that
Yeah.
maybe one of those is gonna be like, "You know what? I wanna become a NASA scientist." And maybe that kid or something else, and he's gonna be the kid who cures some major disease because he watched our video. You don't know the impact you're gonna have, and you have to keep going.
Boy, that is such an important thing, is just almost like I know it's definitely on some of the projects that I've had where it's just like, is this worth going through the motions? Like I
Yep.
most recently just released a book called Welcome to the Hippocampus. It's a storybook and memory journal for kids, and basically it's got a little sort of Dr. Seuss kind of rhyming sort of thing that happens. But it's guiding you through these different parts of the brain, and the kids are allowed to journal in those sort of open spaces in the book, and
That's
and so
rad, by the way.
it thank you, and it was really fun, and, like, it wasn't my first book that I had released, so I understand how to go direct to consumer, I know how to get it on digital distributors and get it out into the world and stuff like that, but it is just sort of going through the motions of that, you know, like, "Okay, I have to not only build this thing to its completion, but then I have to promote it, I have to get an audience behind it, I have to set up the channels for distribution and all that stuff." But then you start picturing if you can picture your audience, your dream audience of, like, that parent and kid moment where they're sitting down with that book or watching one of your videos, and you'd be like, "This is why." Even though that's not a quantity story, like, those quality sort of views and experiences, I mean, I think it definitely helps when it's like you're doing something that's for kids or something like that. That definitely kind of helps fill the bucket, but, I do think even when working in advertising and stuff like that, I'm like, this idea isn't going to be for everybody, but the people that it's gonna be for,
Yep.
they're gonna love you that it wasn't for everybody, you know? They're gonna
Right?
love the choices that you made to make it that small, intimate thing?
I love that. And because I think that here's one thing that I think people confuse. Um, a lot of creators confuse content with creative direction and with mission and purpose, and it's
Yeah,
like they're just making stuff. And I mean, no
yeah.
problem about that. I know there was a thing that came out recently where one of these streamers was picking it's like a thing right now with streamers picking fights with UFC fighters, which is the most ridiculous crap I've seen on the planet. Like
Oh
if you're gonna
god.
pick a fight,
Yeah,
and it's not just one situation, it's like 4 or 5 of them. And like what
yeah,
I think they're doing is like I know that they're going for the shock value and they're going for the, um it's kinda that hook to pull people in, but the reality is it's like, there's not really a creative I mean, maybe there is a creative direction, but I feel like you have to define the difference about, like, just making content that spams and gets numbers and something that has what is the story you're trying to tell? If those guys are trying to
Yeah.
tell the story of, like, "Here I am, undermatched, David versus Goliath story," alright, but if you're just being a punk that people wanna see get beat up,
Yeah.
well, I don't know if that's helping with any way anything in any
Yeah.
way, you know?
You do kinda see some things out in the world and you're like, "So where does this go?" I
Right?
understand what this is right now,
Yeah,
and kudos, 'cause, I'm watching and totally engaged in this, but, like, what is the next evolution of this sort of, you know, content or whatever? And some people might have a vision for that, other people I think are just flying by the seat of their pants.
right? Do you think how do you think people can find their creative vision? That maybe that's the better question to ask. Maybe someone's sitting there going, "I do feel like I'm being kinda spammy right now, and I'm all over the place." How can people sit there and figure out what it is that is their creative voice?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question, and something that, like you can go through the paces of, like, trying out different things. I mean, this is an experimenter's paradise, right? You can try these things out. I mean, if you're resilient enough to have some things not pan out to be, you know, the biggest hit of your, career as a creator, I think that's the only way. I mean, it's just like, doing the job and deciding, do you love it? I mean,
Yeah.
there are definitely people that I've talked to who've like entered into something where they got a lot of attention for it, but they were like reviewing books. And they're like, honestly, I'm, I guess I'm good at reviewing books, but I don't love reading this much. And I'm like, okay, fair. Maybe that wasn't really thought all the way through as to what you wanna, how you wanna put it. But I do think it's like you have control over when you kind of pull the ripcord and decide whether, to bail on it or not. So I think that's probably the best way is just to hang out. And I think it's like, I guess I kinda call it like hanging out in the places that you wanna be. Like, so if you are, you know I wanted to start making a sort of an episodic, comic. And, so I started, showing I started putting something up on Global Comics that was like kind of a monthly, um, episodic story. But on top of that, like, went on those Reddit threads where those sort of similar like-minded people were, and, like, I started to join other social groups and stuff like that. So I think it's, like, beyond sort of, like, just doing the work of whatever that creator is trying to discover it. It's like, discover if these are your people too, because I think
Mm.
that kind of, you know, not just, online, but just in work life, that's one thing I've found is like, you know, 50% of it is do I love the work? The other 50% is like, do I love the people that I'm gonna show up with? Do I love, the audience that's like encouraging me? Is it all positive and do I feel good after I've been doing this for a while? So um I don't know. That's where I would start probably.
I think so, and I think I love do you enjoy showing up every day to create what you're creating? And do you enjoy
Yeah.
the feedback that you're getting? Because I think that, when you look at creators' brands, um, you have to look at the signals whether they're thinking long term versus just chasing engagement. Because I mean, I
Yeah.
think that if you're thinking long term and you really are thinking about what does it look like if your whole brand is built around being running up and punking UFC fighters and getting the crap smacked out of you, I don't know how that grows. I don't know where you go with that besides getting into
Yeah.
boxing and and trying to be
Apparel.
which
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm like trying
right?
to workshop this. I'm like, we can figure this out.
Right? I mean,
Um,
there might be, but you have to sit there and think about, like, what is the direction you wanna go? Because for me, like, for Ilani's Little World, my daughter's YouTube channel, which is one of the ones I was
yeah.
referencing, and we're kind of in this transition period, it used to be very kid formatted, but, like, what we've been shifting into is more like her doing kind of mini, um mini kids podcasts that we break into sections
Yeah,
because there's not a lot of podcasts for kids where they talk about to
right.
scientists and cool people about this stuff. And it's an
Oh, that's
evolution.
cool.
Yeah, and we're seeing where it goes, but like we're trying to look at the long-term stuff of what is something that she's going to enjoy doing as she gets older. And, it's just this question mark. And does she enjoy it? Is this something that she actually wants
Yeah,
to do? But she told me, she's like, "Dude, I really love these conversations." And I'm like, cool, then we keep doing it. But she's like, I don't really
yeah,
like doing the things where I'm like acting like I'm running or jumping or stuff like that. And I was like, "Yep," then we stop that because there
yeah.
has to be this love of it. So I want to ask you, like, how do you tell if someone's thinking long term or just chasing engagement? And which one is more important? Is chasing engagement a core thing that everyone should be doing, or should we be having some type of longer vision? Because I don't know, man.
I don't think there's one way to do it as far as, like, should it be long term or short term. I mean, obviously, a lot of times I think of this stuff in entertainment terms more than I do of it being, like, news and a trusted voice that you would be able to follow for long-term periods of time. In entertainment standpoints, obviously, we've seen short films that have been incredible that shouldn't have ever been, like, episodic, check in on this, weekly for years. So, I think short form blasts of, like, you know inspiration that can be, like, maybe just, like, a short thing. It's like, that's pop culture, that's like those are these moments that we go through and, like, are they disposable? Yeah, to a degree, but they're memories that that will etch into, like, you know, our fabric of pop culture history, So I don't think that there's anything wrong with shooting for something that's more short term. Um, but I do think that, like, the longer term things, there's such an opportunity. I mean, like, this is like what you were just describing with your daughter and her, like, future audience is like, we're gonna now start to see people sort of have generational relationships with the talent that they look up to. Not just like, "Oh, yeah, I loved him as a child star," and then, like, they disappeared to go to, like, college or something like that, and then they reappeared as, like, a cool adult star. It's like, I mean, not only is it not just entertainment, but it's just like all these people that they're now seeing that they're their age, they can now move on to the next chapter, which would maybe be podcasts or maybe check out their Substack or, they start to follow a deeper sort of story with them as these, creators grow up. I think that's so interesting, I'm like, I think we're just barely started to see how that's going to net out.
I 100% agree, and I think that you're seeing some of that creator vibe growth also translating
Yeah.
over to brands. I work with some
Hmm.
small wineries, and I have
Oh,
a
nice.
Barrels and Roots podcast, which is a wine podcast, and one of the nice side effects of that was that I started getting some more wine clients, and wineries that were smaller mom and pop places, right? But the thing was interesting is that they had been trying to go the traditional media route, filming, "Here's a picture of our wine bottle. Here's a picture of our new vintage."
Right.
And I said, "Why don't you tell the story of the people who make the wine? Why don't you make your marketing centered on the winemakers, like the people
Yeah.
behind it?" Because that's like
Yeah.
generational. That's the story that people can relate to. And when they started doing that, people started getting more engagement, more connectivity with like the people drinking their wine and like, well, I love this wine, but now I'm not just drinking this wine. I'm supporting Tom Johnson because he made it.
Totally.
And,
Yeah.
and so it's
Yeah.
this humanity of it.
Yeah. It's definitely important to, like, still have that sort of human, and it doesn't always have to be necessarily, like, narrative storytelling, but
No.
that connection to a feeling, you know?
Uh,
That's what we're trying to always sell is a feeling, We're trying to make people feel something, and, like, I still think I know we've got a lot of shiny new tools that can make you
yeah.
feel something, but but it's not a human feeling?
Right.
And certainly we'll get there, but you need somebody guiding that because it's just like you need someone sort of stewarding that part of it? You need that sort of like, that vetter of like, "Hey, this feeling not only is more important than the other feelings in this moment, but it's the feeling that's gonna make people like, love you, you know? And so I think that's, uh, I think that's kind of what we're still gunning for.
I agree. I think, and it's interesting because one of the things too is I think that especially in gaming and entertainment, community
Mm,
is everything.
yes.
It's like you are building community and I think that big studios have understood this all for a while, that community building is a core part of building out this your marketing and your brand building, but like I think that sometimes creators can miss that, that like you have to find that community. How can creatives of all types tap into community as something that they're really, is a core part of their growth and brand?
You it y Your community gets strong by uh, how vulnerable you'll allow yourself to be, I think, or at least maybe your connection to that community is you'll be closer if you put more of yourself out there.
Mm,
And that's the good, the bad, and the ugly, I think. And I think that that's one thing that I've found even personally when I've been sharing, like, you know, a creative journey that I'm going on or something that I'm trying to. A lot of times when you share a failure, I mean, you're gonna get more response and sort of buy-in to the fact that you showed, "Oh, I failed," or I was vulnerable in this moment," or "Hey, I pitched this book," it's funny, like, I had a social post teasing my new book, um, it was a rejection letter from a publisher from, like, 10 years earlier, and honestly, the reason why I shared it was because the rejection was super positive. It was, like, the most kind-hearted, like, leading with love, sort of keep on going message ever, and so I was like, "You know what? I'm experiencing like this awesome thing happening with the book now. This then and now will be great." And I'll be damned if it didn't get like way more buy-in from my community because I was putting more of my sort of like self out there and some of my failures and some of the times when I didn't quite hit it out of the park. And I think that that is infectious whenever you're in a group. The more you can put yourself out there, the more people are drawn to you. But I think, it also just like you're gonna just feel so much more rewarded if you're like putting more of yourself into it. So I think a lot of times people will try to join a new community, whether it be on Reddit or with a writing group or, something on Substack, and they'll really want to put their best foot forward. And they'll really want to show, look, I've got this all figured out. I have the story I want to tell. It's all perfectly mapped out. Why are you here then? You're here because you need something from that community. So it's like, so really it is just about like share where you're at with people, share, your current state. And my gosh, I can't tell you how many times, even, I mean, I think that even goes at a traditional work environment too. Like if you can be a little bit more, I mean, it's not like you have to be open book McGee, but I think if you can be a little bit more of like, it's a trust building thing that I think helps across the board. But certainly, if you're trying to get the most out of a new group that maybe shares your passion, I think that's a great way to do it. Because then you get all these people saying like, "I feel the exact same way. I just have never brought it up." Um, so that has worked for me for sure.
yeah, and one of the things too is I think that when you are that community is so important to build. And to me, like, operating in a vacuum is really hard, and it's really hard to keep things going if you're trying to, like, sit there and throw something at the wall every day and see if it sticks, and then, like,
Yeah,
but not getting the feedback of whether, "Hey, man, I've been also doing that too, and I can tell you that, at, a certain amount of time, something will stick, so just keep it up." Because
yeah,
you have to move from just creating something to building a world people want to live inside, and I think that whether it's a book about the hippocampus, was it? You know, or it's making, kids content that talks to kids about like the coolness of STEM, you have to
yeah.
find a way to create and to put yourself out there because, you know, it, you have to be vulnerable, like, and building a world. I
Yeah.
mean, think about that. I go back to everyone wants to talk about creators now or Mr. Beast, but, like, one of my favorite people that I would classify as a creator, just not in a traditional sense or that we're defining it now, but maybe in a traditional sense would be a better way to say it, but Tolkien. If you go back to
Yeah.
the world of
Oh,
Tolkien, Tolkien
now you're speaking my
created
language.
dude,
Yeah.
he created Elvish, the Elvish language
First.
first. And then he
Yeah.
said, "Hey, let's create a world that this language can live in." And it's just like,
Yeah.
holy crap, man. That's the way to do
Yeah.
it.
Totally. I mean, that is totally the way to do it. It's like the perfect example of like if you just keep building in a sandbox that you love, you're never going to be bored of it, you know? And then
Right.
more and more people you can invite to come in because you've created this sort of thing that just is endlessly interesting to you. I mean, I think that like, you know, I think going back to your thing about, like, going for more views or whatever, I one thing that is kind of interesting that I feel like maybe a lot of creators don't really think about, it's just early on thinking about how your ecosystem can be bigger than whatever that channel is. It's like,
Mm,
what is your and maybe this is like the ad brand guy in me coming out, but it's like, no, from like day one, if you've got an audience, like you should be thinking what your t-shirt looks like. You should be thinking about like
yep.
what, it's what your news and whatever the modern version of a newsletter is like, but like that more steady drum beat. Like build out your world way sooner. If you're into
Yeah.
this and you're like, it's like, because I know that like as people start to get into their channel, they have to keep up with the pace, right? But like if you're kind of building a lot of that infrastructure at the beginning, I think it can really kind of solidify you as like a brand from the jump a lot more. But maybe that's not
I
what people are looking for. I'm not sure.
I don't know, but I think I love it. I think that if you're living in the world and the ecosystem that you're creating, and like
Yeah.
I made t-shirts and hats for my company, and I
Yeah.
made hats for some of my brands because I was like, and people are like, well, why? And I said, because I want to live it. Like, think about it this way, right? Every
Totally.
day I would be going out and looking at my hat wall and getting around to go on a sunny day. And I'm like, what hat should I wear? What team do I want to? And I was like, I love sports,
Yeah.
but I don't necessarily want to be repping these guys everywhere. Like, they're not my
Totally.
life. But when I wear my company hat, man, I feel pride in that. I feel something,
That's
when I
right.
wear one of my podcast brands, I'm like, see this? This is Barrels and Roots, man. This is what I'm all about. And if you can
Yeah.
live in that and be proud of it, and it's an amazing thing.
And I mean, honestly, it's like there's no easier time to be able to do this. Like, as far
Right?
as like
Right?
the things that you can, print directly, the things that you can, release directly without, a ton of like, I mean, yeah, you got to pay some money to have something on a digital music platform or on on a publishing site, but it's possible. It's possible for anybody to do that and have their own brand or their own, like, sort of identity carved out. And I think that that's sort of like, as we kind of move more and more into, like, especially creative professionals having to really say, "Hey, my taste level is what's separating me from the rest of the pack," beyond any type of skill-based stuff. Really, that's gonna be your embodiment. It's like everything you do inside and outside of your work life, you know, you can kind of bring to life as an identity now. And so
Mhm.
I think it's a good time if you're an independent creative creator to take advantage of that stuff.
I think so, and I think that that's the thing too that, there is so much at your disposal to create, and I mean, and I'm talking just traditional tools, like, there are so
Yeah,
much cool stuff out there, and I
yeah,
think that if you can one of the things that I'm not a huge fan of AI spam, but what I
right.
do think is that there are tools out there that can, assist you in doing more, in getting more done, and more creative
Yeah,
because it's like it used to be hard to, I'm a huge fan of like I love Canva because I can do, graphic design now for myself that I would have been really, really hard to do ages ago, and templates are an awesome thing, and I think that one of the things that I love to do is, like, for a long time, I was doing this alone, and now I've been
Yeah.
trying to tap into teams, even if it's small teams,
Mhm.
getting people, and that's it doesn't always have to be people that work for you. Networking with people, like, get a
Yeah.
creator group that you're part of that you can, because big agencies have known this for a long time, that a creative system is more powerful than trying to figure out everything on your own. And I think that finding
Right. Yeah.
finding your tribe is a really important thing. And I think that one of the things I would challenge people to do is, some of these tools are really great, but one of the things that I notice when I use, like, AI is that it's kind of an echo box. Like, a lot of these
Yeah.
AI tools would be like, "This looks great. You're doing the right thing." When some of the creator friends that I've had, I'll show them something and they'll be like, "Dude, that's not good enough. I believe you can do better." And I'm like,
Yeah.
"You know what? I can." And I think that's really important to find that network to bounce ideas off of, because I think they're gonna help you in the long term.
I think so too, and I think it's just like, y that's also not only just, like, in the soft ways that it'll help, but, like, everybody is building their kind of future, whatever their future is. They're built like through those relationships that will dictate, what your future looks like, who your collaborators will be. And like, you never know where you're going to meet those people. And, so I think that as far as that's one thing that an AI audience can't deliver on ever. It might be able to give you ways to punch something up or give you alternate ways to answer a brief. But as far as having the people that you wanna, kind of help build whatever future thing you wanna build, you need some people. You need some I don't know, doing it alone is, um, it's a drag.
It's not fun, At the end of the
No,
day,
yeah.
I wanna ask you this too, because you've worked on, like, bold, personality-driven campaigns as well, all types, but, like, how does a person find their voice without copying what's already trending? Because I think that's something that we see a lot of these days is everyone, especially on LinkedIn, my god, LinkedIn
Oh, yeah.
influencers crack me up the most, because they'll literally just be like, "Well, that's a nice post, copy," and they paste it back. But how can you find your own
Yeah.
unique voice, in a time where everyone's copying everything?
Yeah, I mean, well, I guess first, as you're doing it, copy.
Yeah.
Because it's like,
Right.
you've gotta get started somewhere, right? And so
Yeah.
it's like, I think that, like, as far as, like, toiling over, like, how do I find my voice and how can I really own that thing? Eh, to me, you're changing it so much from brand to brand that you work on, and that's kind of the fun of this, is, like, you can be this kind of funny voice on this, beer brand, but you can be this really serious, like, you know, tap into your nerdy mythic side on this gaming, account that you have, and it's like a way to exercise different parts of your brain. Um, so I think it's like, for me, it's not like honing necessarily a voice that's like, I specifically talk this way, and so too shall every piece of creative that I make, because it's just not the way that the business works anymore with as many stakeholders as are in brand voices and stuff like that. But I think being a really good mimic, I think i- is a really good thing to practice, is to like learn, the way that, different, celebs talk, the way that different, politicians talk, journalists talk, brands talk. I think it really is like just starting to understand like kind of the how much it affects, I think is a good exercise. Like, I'm gonna like learn as much as I can about Liquid Death and see from all these touch points how they talk, and maybe I'll try to make some stuff on the side that kind of sounds like that. Great. Now I've mastered a way of copying. And then the other thing is actually, I think a lot easier. Like if you have a brand new brand, one of your wine brands comes out with a brand new brand, looking for a whole new identity, like, that's when you kind of can take all of the things that you've been kinda copying from and being like, "Yeah, but it didn't do this," and you can kind of bring those into something that's kind of unique and stuff like that. So it's never, like, wasted to copy things that are sort of out there as you're trying to figure out how to bring unique things to the way you're telling brand stories and stuff like that. I
I
mean,
love
you know, it's, um it's always fun, but I think that one thing that's been kind of interesting is that, like, not only is it like, back in the day, it was like television commercials, radio commercials. These are the ways where we really get to feel the voice of a
Mhm.
creative. But now it's like, hey, no, I'm actually doing this through, an influencer on their channel
Right.
where it's not about anything it's about them through and through, and I'm working with them or whatever. And so it's like, you know, the art of copying, I think, becomes part of the gig, you know?
And it's interesting too because how do you take something and make it your own? And, like, yeah, that's one of the things that I was slamming on LinkedIn because they don't make it their own. They literally just copy paste, and that's not the art of copying. The art of imitation is taking something and making it uniquely yours. Like, and this you could see in traditional artwork. Like, I remember watching
Yeah,
all these art history, like an art history class in university, and someone would paint something is you're all painting the same picture, but how do you make it yours? Like if you were to take
yeah,
Van Gogh and Picasso and, Rembrandt and show them the exact same scene, they might,
yeah,
they're going to have a similar vibe, but they'll each have their own unique way of doing it. And I think that's kind of the art of copying is like to take something and then to make it your unique flair. Is it
yeah,
um, like, I was talking to my team about my daughter's YouTube channel, like, her stuff is educational. Like, it's always like, from the very beginning, we looked at the toy craze and we're like, a kids channel and everyone was doing toys this, toys that. And I was like, I don't want to be
yeah,
doing toys because what happens when she's 13 or 14 and like, hey guys, I'm here to talk to you about the newest toy. It's like, it
yeah.
doesn't
Doesn't
go
work
well.
anymore.
Doesn't
Yeah,
work anymore,
yeah.
So we had to make it our own, even though we were looking at what was being done. We said, well, how can we shift this to be our brand,
There's this fiction writer that I really like, George Saunders, and he's got a new book out, so he's been doing a lot of press on it and stuff like that. And he was saying, a lot of the role of myself as a writer once I have the story that I wanna tell, and I think that where it kind of applies to advertising is there's always a brief. There's always sort of like a framework of what we need to kind of say at the end of the day. George Saunders was like, basically, once I have that map of this story I wanna tell, it's really my job to make as many parts of that map glow as possible. And I was like, "I kinda know what you're talking about." Like, making like it's the aggregate of all those glows that'll give you this what the identity is, but you might not want this part of it to glow. You might just want this to be a dim part, and you might want and I thought about, like, talking about it being illuminated things was really interesting in thinking about it about storytelling in a new way. Is like,
Mm.
yes, there is necessary storytelling. It can live quietly, but the things that you want to glow, you want that as bright and huge as possible, And so, like, really, you kind of as a creative thinker or a creative director, you're really trying to make as many of those sort of spots on the map glow in the places that they are at any given time.
I love that. Well, and I love it too because it's like one of the things too is like that idea of like all of these touch points, like how can you illuminate something? And sometimes one of the things that I was thinking about too is there's a lot of safe content out there, but like what makes something feel a little bit dangerous in a good way, And is that something people should be trying to aim towards, or is it important to stay safe and within this 9 to 5 of content?
Yeah, I mean, there used to be I think better numbers on like if it's controversial, there were sort of these trusted sort of like, oh, you're going to get such a lift because it's going to be on the Today Show. They're going to talk about on the Today Show. These more traditional sort of older school media outlets, like controversy would just get you so much, unpaid media impressions. You just be getting tons of them. You make a lot of noise. We used to do that with a lot of brands where it's like, we know that there's going to be controversy and this will be polarizing, but the shareability of this will be worth it. And I think that there's still, people are still going to like slow down at the car crash, and so I
Mhm.
think that like there is I think that though there are other things. I mean, beauty can make somebody stop in their tracks,
Yes.
something really very quick and very it can't be long funny, but like, a quick moment of physical comedy can make somebody stop in their tracks. It's like you're just really trying to get that moment of pause, to make people stop, and I think that's become harder because I think that the safe content, you know, really can look pretty professional and nice now. It's safe,
Mhm.
but it's also like it almost is an indicator of like the next 20 are gonna be like this. So give it a long scroll through because this is all just like gonna be the same. But so I think that like there is, I think uniqueness more than it
I
is
love
like
that.
controversial. Like it's just like what is that
I love that.
unique pokey thing that, it's because it's like it seems to be that that's gonna get at least half of your job done, you know? I mean,
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things too is I was watching this one creator the other day, and the whole video was of this guy building a drum, like a traditional drum, and it was like was doing the wood by hand. And in a time where we've all gotten used to like these really short videos, I watched this video for 10 minutes. It was a long form, like vertical video, and I was just like,
yeah,
suddenly I looked down and I was just like, I've been watching this for 10 minutes, but it was so beautifully done that
yeah,
I was pulled in and I was hooked. And I think that that's one of the things you have to realize too is like beauty can be a hook. A
yeah,
message can be a hook. There's so many things that can pull people in. And I think that like that controversial content kind of became like the default for a lot of people online for a while. And I think people are realizing it doesn't have to be. You can do other things, and especially if you're looking at breaking
yeah.
into brand partnerships, they don't always want the
No,
controversy. They
no.
they want something that's stable, and they're like, how if a YouTuber is looking or someone's looking to kind of connect to bigger brand partnerships, what would you tell them?
Well, I mean, I still think that and I won't be the first person probably has mentioned this, but, they're looking f they're looking for the authenticest, the most
Mhm,
authentic, person that they see within sort of a group of, people they're considering. So, like, I
mhm,
think that, like, there isn't, you know, I think that you could probably make some assumptions about the certain size of some brands and, like, the safety threshold at which the if it's a wholesome brand or a kids brand and, you've got a lot of twerking videos on your feed, I don't know if that's gonna necessarily line up, but, like, I do think that, like, not eh, I think brands, especially most savvy brands are gonna see through people who are too polished, because they don't want that either. That's what they could make with their in-house team is something that sort of looks like a polished version, with, like, no edge or no sort of, like, human feel to it. Like, that's something that can be made all day, with a small team, and so it's like, it really is trying to find, if you're trying to get I also think knowing sort of what your category is, like, I do know that, like, last year I worked with an outdoor tools brand on something, and they had, like, a platform of that they went to for all of their creators that were, like, all outdoor creators are signed up
mm,
on this site. And like basically, so any photographers or travel vloggers or whatever who have some foothold in outdoor activities, they're up there so that you can, it's like a marketplace, right? So I think that can help too. Is just kind of knowing, okay, well, what's my kind of category? Like, is my category, am I for moms? Like, 'cause there's so many of these platforms now that kind of bring these, I don't know about the efficacy of how much work you get out of them, but, it seems like to be a great place to start if you're trying to get a foothold in working with more brands, you know? 'Cause beyond, like, working direct, just reaching out directly to marketing people, I don't know what other options there would be besides that.
Right. Well, I want to ask one last question. As you're building your own content and building your own creative vision, um, how do you continue to build your leverage and keep growing your brands?
I think right now, it's like, so I just launched a site for the first time. Like it's a shop where you can buy, or some of the content's free, but you can buy the books, buy the records, look at the comic and stuff like that. Um, and so right now it's about, a promise of like, how can I be different than other publishers? And like, one of my big things is frequency. Like I want to put out
Hmm.
more titles more often. There's not as many sort of like, you know, loops I need to jump through as far as with a publisher and with retailers. There's a lot of things that I can kind of like fast track. And so, that's sort of my promise to my audience right now is like, you're going to have, you know, hard, tangible copies of books on a more regular basis that you guys can enjoy at home together. And so that's kind of what, and obviously I need to keep that engine going with more stuff.
Hmm.
But, that
Right.
also becomes kind of like, the basis for the content that I make and whatever is all kind of fed from whatever those products that I'm making for that site are. Um, so yeah, just keep going, like I said, I think that's, like, just keep momentum, on the things that you love, when they hit, you know?
I love I loved Finding Nemo. It's one of my favorite movies, and I love Dory's "Just keep swimming, just keep
Just keep
swimming, just keep swimming." I think that that's one of the best things that anyone ever told me was just keep going. You'll figure it out, and then the challenges that you have, will be stuff that you can figure out if you can continue to put one foot in front of the other. You do not have to have all the answers, but you do have to keep moving, you know? And I think that movement is important because at the end of the day, um, people wanna hear what you have to say. People wanna hear your story. People would love to hear the message that you're trying to share. And I think, there's someone out there that can really use what you're spreading. Someone out there who can take that information and go, "Yeah, this is important to me." And,
Yeah,
just keep showing up. And if you need to take a breath and slow down, then do so. But understand that,
yeah.
people are looking for what you're creating. Where can people go and look and find out more about you?
Yeah, so the books and stuff like that we were talking about is neonnightlight.com. Neon as in neon sign, nightlight.com. And then you can also go to markmaziarz.squarespace.com. You can check out my advertising work and stuff like that, the brands I've worked with. Some of my favorite stuff there too.